Good evening. It is 6:30 p.m. on November 9th, 2020. We are calling the Special Operations Committee meeting to order. So, according to our agenda, the first item is to approve the minutes from October 13th, 2020. Do we have any comments on that? All right, so we'll just do consensus. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? All right, so we move to acceptance. All right, item 2 is going to be discussion and possible consensus of the following. Financial reports through October 2020. Mr. Barone, I will turn it over to you, starting with A1 for the detailed financial projection.
Thank you and good evening. I'm going to go over A1 and then A2 is really a different flavor of A1. So I'm going to walk through any changes from last month on A1 and then take any questions on those if that's all right. So the first item, the wage projection. We've been projecting a deficit, and we saw the deficit increase by about 213,000, and that was because we hired additional staff, as you know, because you approved 2 teachers at the last board meeting, and that was the primary driver there. There was also some other movement, and there was a little bit of savings projected on the non-certified side. But so the projection in the deficit increased from 213,000 to a combined deficit of 2,033,112. On the benefits, the next column across the right, the projection decreased. So it decreased by 145,500 to a projected deficit of negative $236,233, and the driver there is all insurance. We have a lot of movement. We have a lot of assumption on who's coming on insurance and going off, and so we're making adjustments as we get the information. The other component of the benefit projection was the unemployment amount, and that has not changed because we're waiting for the next unemployment bill to reforecast that amount. Okay. On technology, the projection, the deficit decreased by 50,000 to 455,757 because we are buying additional Chromebooks and other devices because of COVID. Those were the 3 main changes related to the projection. The special ed, I removed the projection related to the AR versus the CT State Board of Ed ruling because we really wanted to focus primarily on the general funding grants. So I took that out of this schedule and out of A1 and A2. The other items, transportation and PPE projections, have not changed for this period, and we will revisit those as we do every month. And then lastly on this schedule, the revenues, I didn't make any adjustments on the revenues. I left them as projected because we just got our CRF grant approval at 3:53 p.m. today was when I believe the final approval came in. So obviously we didn't have that information to project. And I actually need to circle back to food service because we reduced the operating loss projection by 210,000. I apologize, I missed as I went down my list. So the new projection is a deficit of negative $272,615. And that is based on participation improvement expectations primarily, but Mr. Bondi, I believe, will discuss it when we get to the food services area. And that's my summary of item A1. Are there any questions?
I have a question, just really quick. When you were going over technology, you said technology's deficit or technology's projection decreased in the deficit, or did it increase?
I'm sorry, you faded in and out. Could you?
Did technology increase or decrease? You might have just misspoke, or I might have misheard. I don't know.
The deficit increased.
Okay.
It
Okay.
increased by, the deficit increased by 50,000. So
Okay.
it went 50,000 to the bad if you want to.
Okay. Yeah. But, okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. It's, all right.
No, you were right. I just missed. I was just on
Yeah.
the. Yeah.
Well, A2 shows it a little clearer. When you look at A2, you can see it better because you have the numbers
months.
side by side. But we started with A1 last month, so I thought I would go that, I would go along the same path.
Sure. Any questions before we move on?
Okay, I just want to address one thing. When you look at A2 and it looks like our projection is, our projected costs, the deficit went down. It's really because I moved out that AR versus CT State Board of Ed ruling, because that's really not going to be addressed by general fund or grants. We are still responsible for those costs, but that is not scheduled to come out of the grants or the general fund. So it's a little bit, if you compare October, November, it's a little bit misleading.
Thank you. I appreciate you specifying that.
And then item A3 is our standard munis report. And then, just to understand to go back to the special ed, we have that in reserve. The 599, 500. That's going to come out of our reserve to pay for that. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I have these 3 reports and it's just a little unwieldy. And I apologize, but A1 and A2 agree for the month. One's just it's kind of like a vertical view of it, and that's really the standard we had used in the past. That the A2, but A1 is the new one we started to use because of the different funding sources that became available this month or this year with the CRF funds and the CARES Act and the savings we're projecting.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sure. Go ahead, Aaron, and then Karen.
I don't know if you can see me because I can't see everybody.
I can't see you, but I see
I'm
it.
sorry.
It's all good. You're fine.
So thank you for taking out the special ed law, the financing for the law. That it's a little over 500,000, correct?
It's 599,600.
Almost.
599,500 is.
And that is coming. Is that coming from an old 2% account?
Correct.
A former 2% account.
It's coming from the reserve. Yes.
Okay.
It's coming from the
Dr.
reserve.
Mento?
It's coming from the reserve that we just went to the town council about 2 weeks ago. So it's coming
Okay.
from the reserve from the 1920 school year.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So essentially, for clarity, rather than withdrawing from the 2%, we're using the roller. That's why we're calling it the reserve.
Correct. It's the 2% account. Correct.
And Mrs. Levesque has a question.
Yes, I do. Under other accounts, I see an additional 50,000 deficit. Can you give a little bit more detail on that?
Which schedule are you looking at, please?
A2.
A2?
Mhm.
Oh, that's where the technology is. I'm sorry. The technology is in the other accounts on A2.
So wait a minute. So the additional 50,000 is from technology?
Correct. It's the additional deficit. So a lot of the lines from A1 correspond 1-to-1 to A2. The salaries we combine. So we combine those two on A2.
Uh-huh.
And the benefits and what we have is called benefits on A1 is broken out between benefits and unemployment. But the other accounts is made up of the special ed, the PPE, and the technology.
Okay, thank you.
But if you look at, if you compared, and I guess I didn't put it in there, and maybe that's something for next month, but the technology that we projected on A1, the negative 455,000, that was,
Right.
and I'm sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, yes.
The negative 455,757, that was negative 400,757 last month.
Okay. All right, that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So I guess we go to A4, correct? Electric bus. Are we, Mr. Brown?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Autumn.
Are we moving on to A4 then? That's the
I
next
don't know.
item on the agenda besides
The-
munis.
Sure, I didn't know if you were gonna stop and do consensus or you're moving forward, either way, yeah,
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, sorry. I can, let's do that. You're right. Okay. So taking consensus to accept A1 through A3. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Abstention? All right. Moving on to A4. Thank you, Mr. Barone, for reminding me.
Okay, so can everybody hear me?
We
Okay,
can hear you.
all right, okay, I just, so, we have, Walter, I think just popped, or, so we have, Maggie and Walter from National Express / Durham. I think Durham's our bus company, but I believe National Express is probably the home company. And then we also have Adelaide, who's been involved in the electric bus or electric vehicle initiative or project that we've been kind of learning about the process. And I'm not sure who's going to start from Durham, but they have a presentation that you folks all were sent were sent hard copy and a link to on Friday, and they're going to walk us through that that whole presentation.
Awesome.
So Maggie, are you going
Yeah.
to start off?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie
Hi.
Clancy. Thanks for allowing us to be part of your meeting tonight. I've worked for National Express for a couple of years. I have an advertising and media and content background, but started to work with them on some customer projects about 2 years ago. And over the last several months, they started to create a small group of folks that would be focused on how do we deliver electric school buses to communities and districts that desire it and want it. So I raised my hand because I thought that was a nice, juicy problem to try to solve for. And also I think kind of aligns with my own personal values in terms of what I think is good to do for communities and students. So excited to be able to partner with folks like Adelheid and as well as Dominic to think through how we can provide this to Wallingford if you guys decide you want to go forward with this initiative. Before I get started, Walter, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Sure.
Okay.
Walter Watson here. I'm Vice President of Purchasing for National Express, which includes Durham. This is actually the first board meeting I've attended that wasn't my own kids. So thanks for having us on. As you can probably tell from Maggie and myself, we're not part of the sales team. We are sort of a different mandate. We have really sort of ambitious plans for electric vehicles, I think, at least in the context of greenhouse gas reduction strategies and which direction we want to take it. Our head office is based in the UK, and as you can probably imagine, the environment there is different. It's probably more conducive further along in the electric vehicle space. So happy to be here. Thanks for everyone's time. I know this can sometimes maybe be thankful work, but just anxious to talk to you about EV.
So Dominic, should I try to present from,
Sure.
let me see if I can do this
Let me see if I can
properly.
We can see it.
Oh gosh. Okay, it just says I can't see it. No. I see you, but I don't see my presentation.
Is it on a different window?
Maybe. Let me see.
Yeah, because we can see your whole your whole
My whole screen.
Yeah.
If you just open up your presentation, we should be able to see it.
Okay, that's a good idea.
The
Okay.
slides,
So if I do that,
Yep.
does that work?
make it full screen. Yeah, there you go.
And then if I do this, okay.
There you go.
Perfect.
How's that?
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
All right. I can't see you, but I can see it. So I guess it's okay.
I'll watch for everyone else's questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to assume that you're all still awake and nodding and smiling. I know that Dominic had shared a little bit of background in terms of, our approach and what we were looking to do, I think, in a previous meeting. But before I kind of dive into this, I thought I'd set a little bit of the stage in terms of where we're at in exploring the opportunity for Wallingford, just to ground us. So as part of our process, right, we go through a sort of a discovery phase to understand, what it is in terms of the fleet requirements and the contract, as well as from an infrastructure standpoint, who the utility companies are, what the landlord situation is in terms of the land that we're storing the buses, etc. And then the idea is to apply for grants. Well, it would be line the district, apply for grants, and then the outcome of that would then be an RFP with our OEMs and an official proposal. So where we're at currently is we had thought we would be closer to the grant stage of things, but the grant that we're looking to apply for has since been delayed. It was meant to become available sometime in October. It's been delayed, and this is the VW grant that we're focused on. It's been delayed to probably early January. We're waiting for that confirmation. So what that's allowing us to do is have a nice, meaningful check-in with all of you to just understand where your heads and hearts might be in terms of electric school buses for your community and your district. And it allows us to sort of set expectations in terms of what we know today, what we hope to achieve, and what we recommend, and then hopefully get your alignment and support against a specific path in order to achieve that. So today is just that check-in and our opportunity to present some scenarios to you. We are not asking by any means for you to align to any specific purchasing commitments. It's more just so that we can be focused and put our energy in the right places in order to get the maximum benefit for the destination that you so desire. Our goal, once we get through the grant award, so sometime in January, after we have an aligned path in terms of how we apply, will then be to come back to you with an official proposal to review and approve. So that's when the big decisions get made in terms of how you go forward and what you're actually signing up for. Today is really just to align all key stakeholders against a specific path so that we can be organized and sort of go after the thing that you so desire and we can hopefully get the best pricing for. I hope that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions yet?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sure.
So the way that we decided to approach this is sort of a small, medium, and large approach. We looked at 5 buses, 17 buses, and 32 buses. What would that look like for you guys from a cost standpoint, environmental standpoint, et cetera? And the reason 5 as sort of the small option is because other districts who are exploring electric school buses, this is sort of where they like to start, just to understand from a pilot standpoint how to get it working for their district. 17 we chose, which seems like a weird number, but the reason why we chose 17 is I'm not sure if you're aware or if you even care, your governor did sign an MOU committing to 30% EVs by 2030 for medium to heavy duty vehicles. And so 17 would be the number of 30% of your type C, type Ds that you currently have, so that's sort of what we're offering as a medium option. 32 was sort of our large option, and that's when we kind of looked at the real estate that we currently are storing buses and what we thought from a maximum standpoint that we can actually implement from a plan. So that's kind of the way in which we've bucketed these things, and then we're gonna, on the next page, we'll kind of take you through sort of like what checks which box. So the considerations, what we looked at, the inputs, right? So we looked at your current fleet requirements and routes. We looked at the environmental impact and state requirements. We looked at what was available in terms of grant opportunities, and what we also thought we could best tell the story to maximize the benefit of those grants in that award. We've been working with Wallingford Electric to gather data on infrastructure and what we can actually accommodate with Wallingford. We've looked at other districts, both ones that are currently under National Express, like White Plains in New York, where we're testing some technology that we hope to be able to scale and bring to Wallingford once it's proven. And then the one thing that it sort of differentiates Durham from other companies who are attempting to solve for this in the school bus space is Durham can bring best pricing from a purchasing standpoint, bus purchasing standpoint, because we do have that scale and strategic relationships with the OEMs who are actually building and making these buses. So that's sort of a very high level view of all the different inputs that kind of have went into our considerations and pricing that we'll be sharing with you in a bit.
Excuse me, Maggie.
Yeah.
Mr. Reynolds has a question.
Sure.
You got to unmute.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi.
Question for you. When you
Yeah.
say infrastructure requirements, could you be more specific? Now, you did mention our electric division, right?
Wallingford Electric, yeah.
Yeah, but are there other, is that just it when you say infrastructure requirements? Are you talking about, I don't know, power stations, stuff like that?
Well,
Or
there's a lot
charging
of-
stations?
Yes, charging stations, AC, DC, V2G. I keep thinking like this is the ultimate STEM project. So if you have students who want to work with us, this I think should get them some extra credit because I think it checks all of those boxes. Walter, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of infrastructure because we've been working with different strategic partners to be able to analyze and assess what our options are with Wallingford based on the inputs that we've been getting from Wallingford Electric as well.
Sure.
Walter, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and preface this and say that I'm really not the sharpest tool in the shed. So when we started down the EV rabbit hole, I was quickly overwhelmed with all of the considerations that you have to take into effect, such as what are the operating conditions of the school bus, what's your range, which units would you target, how long do they need to charge. So to sort of support that, we enlisted the help of 3 different suppliers, professionals in this, that specialize more in sort of the power management and the powertrain of these vehicles, which would include sort of the traction motors, batteries, and the DC motors equipped on the school buses. I think in a nutshell, what we're looking at is roughly at this point, because Connecticut has believe it or not, Wallingford has very cheap electricity by state and even national standards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you feel that when you pay any bills there, but it's the reality is it's actually pretty conducive to electric vehicles. What they don't have a lot of experience because they're municipal utility with is sort of these interchange agreements and grid work that's necessary. But we did find an open ear. So when we talk infrastructure, what we're really talking about, pipe in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
charging stations, connection to grid.
Mm-hmm.
And across the different proposals, There are two different types of chargers. There's AC chargers, which is sort of like a standard charger. And then if anyone in the audience here has a Tesla, I don't, make that kind of money. But people have DC chargers, which is sort of like a fast charge. And we think that that's probably where the industry is headed. But the technology is still very, very new. Just to give everyone on the call an idea, an AC charger, which charges more slowly, will range between like $3,000 to $6,000 per charging station. It depends on how you configure it. It still has to be managed. But a DC charger, which is some of the promise of V2G and some of the things that we think are going to really sort of bring us to more of a cost neutral position down the road, those charging stations can run as high as $100,000 per station. So, so it's very involved. It requires people much smarter than yours truly to size up what the right mix is between vehicle count as well as how many chargers, what type of chargers, what can work with the existing infrastructure, grid, and transformer capacity at the site. So sort of in the background, when we received this request to do some sort of discovery, we started that process, engaged Wallingford Electric, went to our real estate landlord, mapped out, okay, what would it take? And I think that's what Maggie's planning. So it's really a ball of wax. I'm not the best person, as you can probably imagine, to speak to it. But I do think, the emphasis for us has been, trying to be as realistic and pragmatic as possible, but also being sort of financially responsible, if that makes sense. We know that these discussions are always a challenge, but we're also committed to the mission of zero emission fleet adoption and electrification of fleets where possible. So we really have tried to come in here and get the best mix. And I think Maggie's just going to present essentially, here's the lay of the land today. We think we can maybe improve it, but this is what it looks like today. I think what the proposal is, a good rule of thumb, Patrick, is probably one AC charger per bus is what you need from an infrastructure perspective. I don't know if that helps. That's a long-winded answer.
Yeah. Just a follow-up. So the infrastructure, like the especially like the charging station, so that gets incorporated in the contract price?
Yeah, and you're talking to two people who are not part of the sales or pricing team from National Express, so bear with me. But the way we discussed, the simple way to sort of frame this is that an EV bus, so right now, I believe the contract is set up where, this is not my forte, so again, please forgive me, is we have a per bus per operating day rate, depending on the vehicle type. What this would be, or how the district might see a cost in a proposal would be an EV school bus would have a different rate that would come through. I think we've tried to quantify total cost. So that was the step we took with our pricing team, but it would come through at like a per bus per day rate, and there would be an increase in that to cover the EV cost. So you'll see this a variance there between a standard diesel bus versus an electric school bus. Is how I think it would be reflected, but I honestly would probably structure it any way feasible. I think that's just how billing is done with the district today.
Dominic, are you able to confirm that? I don't know if you're able to.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds right from at a certain level. I mean, there's a little bit of detail that I'd have to dig into, but no.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Are there
Sorry,
any other
one more
questions?
question.
Sure, of course.
Mr. Barone, do we currently get a line item statement essentially each month from Durham? Or my question is more related to fuel, which I'm sure we'll get to, but I just, while we're on the topic of billing and rates, I just wanted to ask the question.
So we do get a line item based on vehicles, okay? And there's the home to school, and we've got the home to school. We have other types of vehicles that are doing crosstown transportation, et cetera. We don't get, the fuel spiked out though. That's bundled into the rate, if you will. So, we don't get a bill that says, driver, vehicle, fuel consumption.
Okay. I'm sure we all know where I'm going with this. So my only concern with, rating, an electric bus and like a diesel bus, I get that there's a very big difference in cost there, but at the same time, there will eventually be a return on investment, because we know that Wallingford has really cheap electric. So I just wanted to put that out there as like thoughts to consider, because it just, I guess a lot of it is kind of dependent, but we'll get to that part. I don't want to jump ahead too much. So go ahead.
Right. And the idea too is when we talk about costs is, especially as the technology gets better, we expect it to get less expensive, right? And you will see the benefit of that. It's not, we're building this to manage the risk of the upfront costs that are associated with the infrastructure and building for it and purchasing it. Although we feel like this is the time to do it, when it starts to become cheaper and there are ways to offset those costs, like V2G, et cetera, the district will get the benefit of that. So we will just need to think through how we design a contract around those terms, if that makes sense.
For sure. That's part of my cluster of questions that I sent. So we'll just get there when we get there.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of a good segue because, the contingency, right, for us to sort of take this on are those two things. So the first thing being the outcome of that VW grant. It's sort of a weird time because, the access to grants like the VW grant, which has a ton of money sitting in there and not a ton of districts applying for it yet, will not be there forever. But that's why getting direction from you all today or soon will help us get organized around how do we best go after those funds and kind of put Wallingford in a position of strength in order to maximize the benefit of that. But we still need that grant money to help offset where costs are today. And then our ability to secure a 10-year contract with Wallingford to help mitigate risk on Durham's end. And again, that goes back to the risk that we're taking on in the upfront in order to offset that over a 10-year period. If you we have strategic agreements with other transportation companies like in California who've signed up for delivering electric vehicles. There's another sort of power company that's looking at trying to get contracts with different districts as well. And all of them will tell you that they're grant dependent and they are looking for a 10-year contract. So what we want to do is, of course, we want to think through how we can set that up with Wallingford so that you're not taking on anything that you're not comfortable with. And we're building in performance metrics that we have to then, achieve and demonstrate the value back to you. But we're also taking a parallel path to work with nonprofit organizations, CT Deep, to say, what can we do to help create the right regulatory language to allow companies, every single company that wants to deliver electric vehicles, to have contracts that enable the delivery of that who are deciding to take on that risk, then can have those agreements with those districts. So we're looking at it not just from a Wallingford point of view, but also from a state level point of view, because we think it's important that all those who are in this space and have identified those as contingencies have an opportunity to be able to compete. So I just want to pause there in case anyone has any questions about those 2 points in particular.
Mrs. Corso?
Not specific to those points, and
Sure.
I just don't know the answer to this, and maybe Mrs. Kepfer would know this. Does Durham currently have on its fleet any electric vehicles at all, like any of the smaller vehicles, cars, anything like that?
We do with other districts. Is that what you're asking?
No,
Not-
does
Oh,
Durham,
not with Wallingford? Oh,
right? Do they have any electric vehicles on their fleet with Wallingford right now?
Durham does not. No.
And the VW grant, would it cover only buses, or is it covering the smaller vehicles as well? I'm
Walter-
thinking about the special education transportation costs. That's just, one car. So that's what I'm thinking about. So that VW grant, is it exclusive to buses, or would it cover other vehicles as well?
There, Walter, do you want to talk a little bit about, I know in terms of where VW has been, where they decide to go, we're not sure yet. But how it ties even specifically to Wallingford and how their current vehicles qualify?
Yeah, sure. So this is an interesting time. So the VW mitigation fund is apportioned down to states. States then determine how they want to reduce NOx emissions.
Mhm.
And so they have different sort of guidelines state to state. So we're not exactly sure how Connecticut will shake out. But if it's similar to the previous rounds, what we anticipate is there's going to be about $25 to $30 million left in the Connecticut PW Mitigation Settlement Fund. It will disproportionately favor larger vehicles, and really that's due because of the dirtier than a smaller vehicle sort of mindset, right? So you bang for the buck, you can reduce your NOx emissions to a greater extent with one school bus than you would be for 4 or 5 vehicles. Now that being said, it's a good question. I think we have never applied for a small vehicle. We've always applied for, it's usually a diesel vehicle that you're replacing.
Mm-hmm.
And so because there are so few diesel smaller vehicles, I can't say that I'm aware that any grant money has been awarded for just electrification of the fleet if it's a gasoline engine. But we can certainly
you.
research that. Yeah, I was just, I could be certainly wrong on that, but we can follow up and get that to the district, certainly.
Absolutely.
Be happy to. Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Levac?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just some general information in case the public is watching this meeting. Could you just give me just a general piece of information about comparing EV buses to diesel fueled buses? Is there a comparable seating capacity?
Yeah, I mean, basically they're the same except for the diesel engine compared to the battery. So the look and feel is very similar to a diesel bus, and I'm not sure who was able to attend the event that we had
Yes, I
a
was
few
not
weeks
able
back.
to attend, so and I think it's helpful for the public to know anyway, because
Yeah,
since this is of interest to them, I think just some general information might be helpful.
yes, yeah, and some, I apologize. I think it probably would have been helpful to have more visuals for you to be able to see that. But I don't know, Autumn, I think, and maybe Patrick, you attended the event. I don't know if you have any comments based on what you were able to see and feel at the Ride and Drive event.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, the one thing I was really impressed is the comparison of just moving parts on the vehicle. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while, but I believe on an electric bus, there's somewhere around 30 some odd moving parts, but a diesel bus has, I think, 1,000.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is that because of the way the braking system is set up, I think when you engage the brakes, you actually can charge the batteries. Does that make sense? Did I hear that right? Yeah.
That's correct.
It recharges when you brake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I mean, again, we got on the bus. It reminded me of just, when we were, when I was younger, being on a bus, same size, same, I should say comfort. I don't know about, I'm just kidding. But it was a bus. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Nice and quiet though. So.
Yeah.
No horses.
No horse.
The other question I had is, what is the anticipated range of travel per charge?
Well, Walter, you should have those stats based on the RFI we did.
Yeah, so we did an RFI. We did where we basically asked every major supplier of school buses to give us their offering, sort of pre-negotiated pricing and requirements. The truth is, from a range perspective, on the high end, I think we have a supplier that's now going to give us up to 200 miles.
Yeah.
That's on the extreme end, and on the low end, it's probably 60 miles.
Right.
We think that, fortunately, sort of how they equip these vehicles, they have tiers. So some suppliers have 1 to 2, maybe 3 levels of offerings for range. In any event, I think we would make sure, of course, that from an operations perspective, that range would never be an issue. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of the cost of the vehicles comes into the powertrain, which is like the battery packs. So more, larger basically, easy way to think about it is larger batteries, more range. So the more batteries or the higher number of batteries we have on a vehicle, the costlier it is right now. We think at some point that probably changes quite a bit, but so we want to be judicious, I think, in delivering the right product. We're looking at for Wallingford routes, a mid-range up to 120 miles per day is plenty to cover the vast majority of route needs in Wallingford. It's come a long way, though. It's really impressive. In school bus, just a quick aside, and apologies, I'm not sure how much we shared kind of prior to this, so we're using some jargon. But if there's at any point, if we say something that doesn't make sense, like V to G, please stop us and ask what we mean by that. The truth is, I've been purchasing school buses for quite some time. I even have a weird nostalgia for smelling diesel fumes at a bus stop from my childhood. But this is the first time, truthfully, this is the first time where I can actually see a school bus is fundamentally changing. And it's with EV. And it's to compare it to, I think I was a little shocked when I was told that they had to put an audible noise on school buses because they were so quiet. That you could not hear, you could not hear an EV school bus driving on the road, so they had to equip it with a sound system so that you could hear it coming.
Yeah,
that was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
Patrick's absolutely right. We think that over the long haul, so over a 15-year period, we really do think we're close on getting cost neutral. We've got maintenance, fuel savings. These are two things that we think are going to really tip the scales. That, in conjunction with V to G, I think makes a big difference for EV.
Yeah.
The interesting thing now, and this is why it was kind of refreshing to hear that you had at least some of the constituents, parents in the community were curious about EV, is that the one thing we have now that we won't have in probably 2 to 3 years is this VW settlement fund. So we want to give you what you're looking for. We're not here to push anything. You don't have the sales team. We're not looking for an angle. If you want to go EV school buses, if you want to adopt this in any way, for a number of reasons now might be a good time. And the biggest reason is probably VW. This is for everyone on the call, this is sort of the settlement fund for the diesel fraud that was happening. Big payout. It's a one-time payout. And we think that the state of Connecticut probably has 2 to 3 years of that to pay out. So I think if you're thinking about EV in the next, anywhere from 3 to 8 years, it's probably worthwhile to look at it now, because in 2 to 3 years, the support goes away. And it turns out that support is very significant today, very significant in a way that the expected price decrease and some of the improvements we're going to see in the infrastructure and in the framework from a regulatory standpoint in 3 to 5 years is probably not going to make up the difference of what we can get with grant support today. And it's a really compelling case from a community standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. right now we're comparing the way these grants are awarded is we're taking an old dirty diesel bus and we are comparing the NOx emissions, which is nitrogen oxide emissions. And we're saying, okay, if I give you a new diesel bus, what does that do? And so a lot of the awards are based on how much you actually reduce your NOx emissions, right? What's your improvement per dollar, right? So it's probably the right way to look at it. When you go to an EV, there's just no comparison. You've got no denominator. You have no NOx emissions. So it's a very compelling case if that's something you're interested in now. And it makes a big difference. Probably in the next 5 to 6 years, it'll make a disproportionate difference to what it costs us to acquire these and get them on the road.
Walter, I just skipped ahead to the scenario slide because I feel like we kind of went through a lot of the considerations. I don't know if folks had specific questions on that page who happened to read ahead, but I feel like we've covered a lot of that, and I know that most of the questions are around costs.
Mr. Reynolds had a question.
Yeah, or just a couple of comments. One,
Yeah.
I was during my bus ride, I was really impressed with the acceleration.
Yes.
People have a tendency to look at electric vehicles as being, especially a bus, very sluggish. And the other thing, and correct me, Maggie or Walter, if I'm wrong, I believe the lifespan of electric bus is, 20% longer than a diesel bus?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with less maintenance required.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Purcell. Sorry, Maggie.
No worries. I just can't see you, so I appreciate
No,
it.
it's okay.
Okay. Now my question just has to do with, I just heard something about like 5 to 6 years, you're going to start to see a savings or whatever, using electric bus or whatever. But then we're doing a 10-year contract, so we really wouldn't be seeing the savings. It would be, how does that work?
Well, Walter, you can jump in too, but we don't really, our goal would be to start to provide savings as soon as they become available, right? And there are a few steps that are required in order to make sure that Connecticut can take advantage of V2G. Right now, there aren't incentive programs set up to enable that, but that's something that we would be working on. And while we look at, where we think costs might be today, the technology, the improvements that are coming along, it's accelerating very quickly. And we expect to be able to take advantage of that by being first movers and going sort of bigger than smaller. And we would pass all of that benefit off to you. So while some of it we think we can maybe affect in the first few years, some of it will require a few extra steps in order for us to get there, just because it's not as simple as flipping a switch. But we would continue to pass along those benefits along the term and life of the contract. I don't know, Walter, if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. So we try to put the customer hat on, if you will. I think about if this were D303, that's my district with my kids. You've got, what are all the considerations to take into effect? So in Connecticut, the cost is disproportionate. The cost is tremendous for an electric school bus at the outset. There's really no way around that. It is a 3 to 4 times the cost of a normal bus. Mm-hmm. But at some term, we think the tables turn. So, today you can get grant support. And so I guess when I said 5 to 6 years of savings, when we went through the RFI process, we asked each of our suppliers, right? So we asked 6 different suppliers to give us a forecast over the next 5 years based on trends, where you expect the price of a vehicle to be. Now that's a bit of a crystal ball, not perfect. Right. And of course, there's a little bit of an incentive, right, from a manufacturer standpoint to sandbag that a little bit. But we do feel that even a really aggressive reduction in price, in the next 5 years, it's probably only going to come down maybe 30 to 40%, maybe that on the high end. So if you're looking at a $300,000 school bus, and this all cards on the table, 5 years from now, we're looking at a $200,000 school bus. That's still over twice as expensive as a normal school bus. So I guess what I'm saying is, today, I think we can make a compelling case for grant money that makes up that difference and then some. So the price is not going to decrease to the same level of grant support we have today. And that grant support, it will be gone. It's going to be gone in the next 2 years. So I think, if I'm in your shoes, I would say that you're at a bit of a crossroads. So you can either say, hey, maybe we sit on the sidelines for the next 7 or 8 years and hope that, like Tesla's, eventually these things, come down in price. Or if you want to make a change today, it's probably better to do so today versus 2.5, 3 years from now. If that makes sense.
Right.
Right.
I can also kind of weigh in as a Tesla owner. I mean,
Cool.
Oh.
So we bought a Tesla, and it's there at the time there was the refunds or rebates. I don't know how we're referring to them, but something from the state of Connecticut and something from the federal government. And when Tesla exhausted that, my understanding is that they essentially lowered the price by almost that amount. It's still a higher profit margin for them but then doing nothing, but or going all the way down. But essentially, they're trying to make it more like price, like normal pricing. So I expect that would be the same thing that would happen. Like when all of this grant money, essentially either through quantity or through the fund running out, is given, that the prices would probably go down, just according to what I've seen with other electric vehicle companies. So
Yeah, and just like with Tesla, you have to create the demand as well, right? So that's why this is sort of a special circumstance in order to create that, maximize the value of the grant money, but then also start to create a pipeline of demand that then will force the pricing to be a bit more accessible.
attainable. Yeah. Okay.
The other thing is, and I think was it Patricia that asked the question on the cost? I just want to make sure I get the right.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things we talked about is we call it V2G, vehicle to grid. I don't want to, if everyone already understands what this is, then please just ignore what I'm about to say. But there is a lot of hope that what we call vehicle to grid will make a difference on the total running costs of the school bus. And what vehicle to grid is, in some states, you can buy electricity at a rate during the day, which would be off-peak, and then resell electricity back to the utility at a higher rate, so like a peak rate. Right now, there is what they call net metering in the state of Connecticut. We do think that eventually, from a regulatory standpoint, the tide will turn, and most states will adopt some version of hourly pricing to take advantage of that. And why that matters is, if you think about a school bus, one of the things kind of cool about school buses is that most of my background's been spent in asset management and efficiency, and the reality is a school bus is absolutely terrible from that standpoint. It's terrible, right? You're buying a vehicle and you're running it 4 hours a day. So it's not efficient. It's not a quote, a good use, or at least a very efficient asset from that standpoint. But what a school bus also is a giant, what's the EV is a giant battery, right? And so you have extended periods over the summer where these school buses, half of your fleet could be just sitting, just stationary. And so the reason you're seeing things like power companies buying school buses, which is something that's happened, is because they look at a school bus potentially, now that safety is not an issue, they'll look at these as potentially battery farms. And I think that has a lot of long-term potential. And I think anything we're presenting to you now doesn't assume that there are any big benefits there. We do anticipate that will open up some new doors. In fact, we're piloting our V2G electric school buses in White Plains, just south of you. In fact, our pilot's been going on for the last 3 weeks, and it's been successful so far. Now, we don't have good financial data to share, with ComEd and the partnership we're doing there. But we do think that it's a promising start, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity there. It will make a big financial difference, no doubt about it.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions, so we can keep going.
Okay. And just to add to some of those comments, what I had on the previous slide too, just for consideration, and I know Walter mentioned his participation has been mostly with his own board. I'm very close to my own district, and I know that you guys have been going through a lot in terms of how to keep your community safe and healthy through this pandemic. And it's really helped to sort of refocus in terms of how we set up ensuring better air quality. How do we support wellness in terms of respiratory and sort of lung health? And so this again is just another sort of step in that direction. And that's why we also believe that this is just the beginning of the momentum that we'll be building in this area. And why it's important that we believe that the timing is really good from a district standpoint to be organized and apply for those grants now, because we expect more districts to start to try to take from that pool of funds in the very near future. So just a little aside that I wanted to add there. I've been in contact with the American Lung Association that oversees New Haven, and there's a woman there, I think she's a nurse, that's been working on the effects of electric school buses, and she was going to send me some information on that, so I'm happy to share that with you once I have that. So I thought maybe we would focus on the scenarios and recommendations slide, since I think that's kind of where sort of the meat of the presentation. And I probably what would be most helpful is to start to just focus on the cost impact and what does those percentages actually mean. So as you see how we've broken it out based on volume of buses, 5, 17, and 32. And then we've got other categories in terms of, does this meet the 30% commitment that Connecticut has made to be EV by 2030? And I think it's 100% EV by 2050, but we're looking at 2030 at the moment. Where does that volume sort of rate in terms of environmental impact? And obviously, the more buses that you have, electric buses that you have taking away diesel buses, the better the impact. What we think from a grant opportunity, we have the best case to be made in order to get access to those funds. From an infrastructure standpoint, if we intend to build and scale, what are our best options? And then from an OEM standpoint, where do we believe we will start to see some of those discounts? And as Walter mentioned previously, we've already been talking to our OEMs. We've done an RFI to better understand where they're at with the technology, where they intend to go, what's their commitment to innovation, so that we can best choose the right partner for Wallingford if we were to go forward. So, Walter, do you mind talking a little bit about the cost impact column? Because I think that's probably where a lot of questions are in terms of just understanding what those percentages mean.
Sure. Yeah. So I think when we looked at the numbers with our pricing team, we wanted to sort of frame this. We said simple is better, especially for yours truly. And so this is framed in the context of what will it cost the district annually in a normal school year? Does that make sense? So this is probably not a normal school year. Think of this as 21 to 22 school year, and then 22 to 23 school year, et cetera, right? So the idea here is, okay, can we give you some idea on where we think the ballpark's going to be based on a lot of assumptions in the rate? So if you look at Maggie's first line where it says number of buses 5, what we're saying is to buy 5 electric vehicle school buses and to equip them and set up the infrastructure, the annualized estimated impact that we see is it's right now going to be 4 to 6% on top of a normal year. Does that help? Hopefully that makes sense. And then for 17, it's 6 to 8%. For 32, 11 to 15%. Now, we've made some assumptions that if you're buying under 17 buses, that we think that we can make a pretty solid case for grants, right? So the approach here was, if we're going to do this for the district, depending on what direction you want to take, if we're going to go tear up the ground and put in pipe and put in infrastructure and work with the utility, what's the best financial bang for the buck that you can get? And so you can kind of see that 5 buses, we think that there's a range there, and the range is sort of contingent upon how much it costs to set us up, and do we get a 40% grant? Do we get 60% grant support on the project? So that gets you a 4 to 6% premium, if you will. But then if you go over 3 times that number of vehicles, there's not the same increase. So that was how we approached this, which was, okay, if I've got to go through all this upfront cost, what's the best way to manage that cost at a bus level and to be as financially responsible for the district as possible? And that's really how we approached this. This is not some sort of grab in any way, shape, or form. It is, how do we deliver the most cost-effective electric vehicle option? With 5 buses from an OEM standpoint, I think there's an appetite there. Certainly any of our suppliers, Lion or Thomas or IC, would be keen to set up stake in Connecticut, because there are very, I think there's only a single electric vehicle school bus in Connecticut. So all of our suppliers are really keen. We've teed them up that, there's maybe Connecticut is somewhere we look at. But if you're buying 17 buses, you can imagine we can get a little bit more support from a manufacturer standpoint. They want to show this as a proof. So that's how we approached it. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. Maggie, is that?
Yeah, no,
Good?
yeah.
Okay.
I just waiting to see if there's any questions.
I don't see any presently.
Okay. Yep. So, I guess, what we're hoping to get back from you, I guess, is, at this point, there really isn't any risk for you to say, yeah, go for the 17, which is what we're recommending, because we feel like that's where the best value is. But what it does give to us is sort of a big stick to say, we have community alignment behind a plan that we believe will make an impact, not just to the environment and health and wellness of the students, but it will also kind of put Wallingford on the map in terms of making change in this direction. And it's sort of what I've seen in other places where these kinds of plans tend to fall apart, because it requires alignment across many different stakeholders: district, community, utility companies, bus operators, whatever. If there's misalignment on the plan, it's really difficult to pull this off. And so we would love to get your feedback if you're aligned on what it is that we're recommending, or maybe if you need more information. It's a lot of stuff to digest, and it's a complicated thing to sort of pull in and process. And so we're happy to follow up and answer any additional questions that you might have. But by having this time, these next couple months ahead of the grant application being released, if we could get some signal from you in terms of how best to focus our energy, then we can really get to work and ensure that we can provide you with the best proposal to consider. And so I guess that's kind of that's what I've got in terms of our ask of you. The next, go ahead. Yep.
I have a few questions. So, and this is also for clarity.
Sure.
Just for the public's use as well. So my understanding, based on what Walter said a moment ago, is we would be looking at a 6 to 8% increase in the rate on a new contract that would be for 10 years, correct? So I'm guessing this is it's going up one time 6 to 8%, and then it continues to be that. I mean, obviously there are going to be variances, but like essentially it's in that ballpark. So we would be saying, okay, we're going to go up 6 to 8% now, and every year after that, it's 6 to 8% over whatever we've already negotiated.
I think you got it right. So let me pitch it back to you and just let me know if this answers your question. It would be a one-time increase,
Right.
and then year two, your baseline, there would be no additional increase.
Right.
Okay,
just
yep,
you do it
that's
one
exactly
time,
that's
yeah,
exactly where I was
it's-
going.
Yeah, it doesn't continue to add on top of. It is,
Right.
yeah.
So from an operations perspective, I'm sorry you guys you're gonna catch this, but it's something that we have to consider based on public feedback. We've had some issues in the past couple of years with route combinations. You know, I'm guessing that we still, should there be an egregious service level breach, we would be able to negotiate out of a 10-year contract, because you know, if we were showing patterns where
100%.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. If we are not meeting
Yeah.
performance metrics or any sort of KPIs that are put in the contract, absolutely.
okay.
If
I
we're
just
not
wanted to
being
make
good-
sure that this
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
like something that we, you know, we would never, you know, we're kind of like, oh, well, we've signed this thing for 10 years and now we're
No.
like stuck with you if you like, you know,
Never. I
not
would
that
never.
we don't
Yeah.
like you, just, you know,
No, but
I'm
you
just
need
saying,
to,
you know,
need to hold us accountable. And
agreed. Okay.
I would never, that would be a bad practice, I think, for National Express to even want to enter into an agreement that doesn't hold them accountable. So
Sure.
absolutely, if the performance isn't there, then, and I think that's when you kind of get down to the legal language stuff in terms of making sure that there is a termination clause based on, you know,
Surface
specific
level agreement.
criteria. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Okay, and Mrs. Raccio, I saw your question. I just want to continue on my path and then I will call you, okay? Knowing that, as we start to see the return on the, or as not we, you start to see the return on the investment, I'm guessing, I mean, I shouldn't guess, I'm just going to ask, would there be the potential to, are we banking the savings, you know, is essentially Durham banking the savings as far as like fuel surcharge versus electric, stuff like that? Is the rate going to go down over time, or is this being banked as a possible future expenditure for furthering the bus initiative? I don't even know if we have the capability to do more buses afterwards, but
Right.
I just want to know, like, what would be, so we're purchasing 17 buses, and I have a question on that as well, but
Sure.
what exactly does that look like 4 years into a 10-year contract, you know, if you're seeing significant returns?
I don't, Walter, do you want to comment on that? I know that.
So
we,
we've baked in some assumption on savings for fuel. So what it costs us to operate the service. The one I think Autumn, the one wild card here is in the event that V2G becomes
Yes.
a big player.
Yeah.
And I think our intent here is like I said, our intent is to pass that through.
yes.
I have no idea how contractually that's covered, but the intent would be if something like that fundamentally business environment changes, which is what we hope, we want that to pass through the district. And
Yes.
me and my district, I'd want the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's
Awesome.
how we
Yeah.
have it set up in White Plains.
Okay.
Pretty sure. Yep.
Okay, and my final question before I turn it over to Mrs. Raccio is, if we're looking at 17 buses or whatever number of buses, are we purchasing those all at once and taking delivery on those all at once, or are we kind of getting a smattering over years, and does that impact the rate at all?
Oh, I have to ask the fleet purchaser that question. Walter.
Oh yeah, no,
I
that's a
mean,
great question.
Yeah.
So for the
'cause we
sake of
talked
this
about it several
scenario,
different
okay,
ways,
so We did scenario. I think we made a lot of enemies in this process with our modeling team here, the financial modeling team. I think we would go back, depending on whatever feedback you have as a district, right? I think what we wanted to know is, do you want to shoot for the sky? Do you want to put your toe in the water? Because we want to give you what you want. 17 probably, how it's presented here is a one-time purchase. They would be onboarded the latter half of this year because a few things, or next year because a few things would have to come into play. So the idea would be they'd probably come in sometime like Q3, Q4 to start. But so we could toy with the idea of splitting those over 2 years, 3 years.
Well,
Now the infrastructure is all one fell swoop, right? So once you start sort of tearing up the ground, you might as well do it to plan for Easter Sunday. But before that, or how we bring the vehicles on, we could probably toggle that a little bit or stagger that, taper it.
Just to add to that, Walter, I think we could probably work out with the OEMs on how best to manage that. But there is likely to be parameters of the grant award in terms of implementation and when we have to have everything in place or set up. Sometimes there's timelines attached to that. So we would want to look at that as well in terms of guidance and in terms of being able to, like, how much we bring on and when. We would have to follow the rules of that in order to be able to use that money appropriately.
Yeah, great point.
Definitely
Great point.
agree. Yeah. Okay, so Mrs. Raccio, you had a question? You're on mute. You're on mute, just so you know. You're on mute. I can't unmute you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, that was a
anyone
really
read-
good question. You missed it? Okay.
I was gonna ask if anyone could read lips.
I'm going to say it even better now because I rehearsed it once now. So the grant application, we have multiple parties involved between the school district, the electric division, Durham. Who is the actual grant applicant that signs the application?
We will take the lead. But we would need then a lot of times, and we're working with a nonprofit organization to support us in that, but Durham, it really needs to come from Durham as taking the lead, but we would need letters from the community, support from the utility company, et cetera, around the plan that we've outlined as part of the application.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the key here is that we'd be retiring older diesel buses, and that's why we end up sort of bearing the burden thereof of applying for the grant.
Yep.
All right, I have Mr. Votto followed by Mrs. Purcell.
Wouldn't the mayor have to sign on this too? We're spending the town money on this.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Whatever's here to chime in.
I'd like to chime in. I believe that the town would have to weigh in on the contract adjustment extension, however it was done. So yeah, I think that, and we'd also obviously need the funding.
Mrs. Purcell.
All right, maybe this is a silly question, and I think, I'm not sure if you answered it. So the 6.8%, if we did the 17 buses, the contract would go up, which we talked about. So does that assume that you're saying 40% is going to be grant funded and the 60% is funded by Durham, or is that funded by us?
So basically the rate we charge would compensate us to buy the buses. So Durham would pay the 60%, but the service we charge would change a little bit. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, of course.
And we're assuming 40% on the grant, but it could be up to 60 or 65. But we're trying to be a little bit conservative in our assumptions, right? Just to manage expectations of the potential impact in terms of cost.
Mr. Votto?
All right, so based on what was just said, I think what I heard, we might get a 40% of that cost from a grant.
Mhm.
Durham pays the other 60. So the only cost we have is the 4 to 6% increase. That no, 6 to 8% if we get 17 buses.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep. And if we get more grant money than, the 40% that we're assuming, then that would impact your rate to go down.
And I believe that's why we're having this conversation. We're not agreeing to anything right now. We're simply asking to move forward with grants so that we can get a better projection of what the impact would be to the district financially. With
Yeah, I'd like to know what that is more precisely than what we have now.
I think they need the grant I think they need to have the grant, by my understanding, the grant approval first. Mrs. Castelli?
So, can the grant be used for any of the costs or only for the cost of the bus? So in other words, could it pay for the pipe in the ground?
Yeah, it actually can. For EV, it can cover part of the infrastructure cost, project costs, as well as part of the vehicle cost. So sort of it's an interesting, grants are always sort of distributed and administered differently state to state. But you basically, they ask for projects, and then typically it's an up or down vote. You get awarded what you've asked for. There's not always a lot of back and forth. It depends state by state on how much sort of levity you have to be able to go back and forth and say, hey, okay, we submitted it for 60%. Well, can you do 50? There's not a lot of back and forth with these often. It's sort of like, hey, make your best case, and then they will award accordingly. Now, after you have award, if you want to get paid, there are obligations, but there are not necessarily obligations if for some reason you have to walk away. In fact, there was a grant award for not too far from you for an EV bus. I think it fell through, and so it's a no harm, no foul. But while it's open, you stand a sort of, you don't want to come in and ask for the sky. You kind of want to, I think, be realistic with knowing that there are a lot of different constituents and different stakeholders vying for the same funds.
Yeah.
You want to make a compelling case that's realistic. But yes, I think our hope would be that some of this infrastructure costs we could package into the grant request.
Yeah.
And make it competitive. I think this would be competitive because there's just not really an EV presence on medium or heavy duty vehicles in Connecticut.
But so if we were, is Durham's 6 to 8% increase, assuming that all of the grant money would go toward the purchase of the bus? In other words, would our percentage go up if we as a team decided some of that money needed to be used for the town expenses?
Yeah. Yes. No, I think that this is we did it against the bus, to answer your question on this, right? We think there's maybe a little bit of upside there, which would result in a cost impact reduction. Yeah, so we think we think there's room there if we go to the drawing board. We don't want to get too aggressive, but yes, to answer your question, this is done exclusively on the price of the bus. And the reason we picked 17 is because just sort of weird numbers. Why 17? Why 32? Well, 32 is the lot that we currently are on. If you had to support as many buses as you could, how many could you get with the existing lot before going to procure a new lease somewhere else, a new property? And so that's 32. That's why that number is 32. 17 is how many vehicles do we realistically think we could round up that would qualify for VW grant, as well as hit the MOU target for the Connecticut state guidelines by 2030. And so that's why the number 17.
And it also, just in terms of the evaluation of the grant, they want to see a plan that is going to make an impact on those NOx fumes, right? They want to see a reduction in those. So they're looking for a robust plan from a community in order to be able to show the value of, what they're able to provide from a grant standpoint. And that's why we felt like this is probably the sweet spot, right? Because it sort of, in terms of being able to have access to those funds, this is the type of plan they're looking for. This is something that they would get excited about, as well as allows us then to sort of get you the best deal from a purchasing price with the OEMs, and then allows us then to make sense of the upfront infrastructure costs that would be investing in the upfront.
I have a question for Mrs. Levesque and then Mrs. Raccio.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, for general purposes for the public, because we're looking at a 10-year contract, what is the anticipated lifespan of one of these EV buses?
Walter, do you want to take that one?
And how does that?
That's a great
I get all
question.
the tough ones. Walter,
I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble after this meeting because you're going to give you all the
so
tough
there are a
stuff.
lot of things that go into what is like the useful life of a vehicle.
Yeah.
I think we think in the state of Connecticut, a traditional diesel school bus will run anywhere from 10 to 12 years.
Yes.
We believe with some of the improvements in the design, with things such as how the body is actually constructed and side panels on some of our EV vehicles, that we could probably get the school bus to last 15 years. But we have 0 case studies to prove that out, because there are no EV school buses that are 15 years old on the road. We have some of the oldest, and I think ours are a handful of years old down in White Plains. It's new technology, but we're pretty bullish. I think that this is a vehicle, if properly maintained, from a body standpoint, should be able to get to 15 years.
And I think the other opportunity by being able to partner with an OEM on building a fleet that works for Wallingford is that we have the opportunity to make sure, even from a environmental standpoint, I think it has something to do with the climate and calcification of body, or Walter, you could probably speak better to that in terms of like from our maintenance perspective. But there are ways that in which we can help to influence or direct our OEMs to ensure that they are building a bus that will work best for the Connecticut climate and to expand the life of that vehicle. It's sort of the opportunity to get in now to influence that is really important and significant.
Yes, I think that those answers are very important when explaining this to folks in the community. So I thank you for that information.
I thank you for the questions. They're all very good.
Mrs. Raccio, then Mr. Votto, then Mrs. Castelli.
I guess I have a comment and then a question.
Sure.
I do agree that timing is critical on some of these grants. I know as a community in the past, there were steep grants, and the grant community, specifically this state, had funding, and at one point in time, they were very focused on artificial turf for the school districts. And we did apply for that, and we kind of lost out on that opportunity. So I do agree that if we can get in the front end of a grant opportunity like this, we should try to. However, we are in a pandemic, and I am concerned about the finance piece of it. If we actually applied for this grant and it was awarded, and at that point in time, our financial condition changed to the point that it wasn't feasible for us to move forward, at what point are we committed? I think it would be the drawdown of the first dollar or the commitment after we get the grant, but I just don't know if you guys had that detail.
I asked this very question this morning because I think we all know that one thing we can't do is anticipate what's coming down the line, especially with who anticipated a pandemic and the impact that it would have on all of us. And I in just trying to understand the risk that, is there any risk to you sort of agreeing that we go down this path and apply, and then what if things change? So I checked with our nonprofit organization, I checked with some folks internally. There is, if something happens and it no longer is a feasible plan, and remember, you still need to even see what the plan is, right? We need to be able to provide you that information in order to even assess that it's something that you want to do. You're fine. We just don't get the money then. That's all that happens. We go back and we say we're no longer able to execute it for X, Y, and Z reasons. And we either modify or, we just don't go forward with it. So you're absolutely within your right to walk away at that point if there's some kind of significant change. Now, it doesn't look good for us, of course, because from a reputation standpoint, they'll say you asked for all of this and then you're walking away from it. But that would be on us as the folks that actually apply for the grant, not on Wallingford. But you're not committed until after we provide the proposal, and probably I would say, Walter, purchase the buses and start to build the infrastructure, start tearing up the ground, because that's when the real costs really start to hit, if that makes sense. Is that fair? Is that a good answer to your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Votto and then Mrs. Costelli. You're on mute. We can't hear you. You're on mute, Mike.
Do we have like a 5-year contract right now with the bus company?
Yes, we are in year 1 of 5.
I was on mute the whole time I was talking.
Yes.
All right. I said is that my question was mostly answered by Mrs. Racio's question, but I need to ask that question. And now the additional costs are 6 to 8% if we were to get to 17. Those the associated costs would be some of the infrastructure you talked about, correct? Which would be in the end, it would benefit Durham school, correct? Those costs.
I didn't
Potentially,
hear any
yeah,
of that,
potentially.
unfortunately. Okay.
I think I heard. I'll replay it here. So Mr. Votto was saying the infrastructure and the setup costs. It would be to Durham's benefit. I think probably down the line.
That's right.
Fair. I think that. Yep, I think that's fair. Actually, we were joking with Dominic and the team that this would be a lot easier if you just owned the property.
Exactly.
Yes. It's just one of the quirks to this. It's sort of is like we have to build our gas stations.
Right.
Yes.
Next
So
point.
this would require us to get into a long-term discussion with our landlord because we don't own the property, and then improve the land there. That's right.
What scares me is if in 4 years we decide there's an awful big problem with Durham and we don't want to no longer, we can't come to an agreement on a new contract. Well, we just gave them all this infrastructure that came out of our budget and it's theirs. There it goes. To me, that the costs right now to me seem a little too sketchy for me right now. That's it.
Yeah, that's fair. That the setup cost is absolutely fair game to critique. I think it's a challenge. You're going to have that with anyone. That's the big hurdle here is infrastructure, is setting it up, no doubt.
Mrs. Costelli.
Okay, so before I go to my original question, I'll just mirror off of Mr. Votto's comments. How much ground has to be dug up? Is it only at this location where the buses are stored?
Yes. Yep. So
And
basically,
yes.
they're resting home. Mm-hmm. And I think
is
we
that
had scoped out maybe.
Is that Wallingford property? They're housed in Wallingford or not?
It's in Wallingford. Yeah.
They're
Yep.
housed
So
in
in the
Wallingford.
event that you got, I hate to say the reality is if we vacate a contract or terminated, or it goes to bid and competitors awarded the contract. Typically what happens, my understanding, typically what happens is, we would get out of the property, the landlord would then market to our replacement because often, especially in the Northeast in particular, zoning and congestion sort of leave these bus lots few and far between. Yeah, so it's likely our competitor would probably get the property if for some reason we failed from an operational standpoint. But that's a little at risk. I'm not sure if that helps.
Yeah.
But yes, it's in Wallingford.
It generates more questions, I think, but that's okay. My original question was regarding safety of these new buses. Now, I assume that the buses themselves are lighter because they're not carrying fuel. And unless the batteries are as heavy as the fuel, I don't know, but I was assuming they're lighter. And if that's true, are they easier to roll over if they're in an accident?
This is surprising, but they're actually not lighter because the batteries
Oh.
are as heavy as the fuel, turns out.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But they are, I think most of these buses, because they run predominantly from a digital platform, they're all equipped with telematics. They're sort of heavily teched, if you will. And so I do think that there's maybe a slight edge on the safety side, aside from, of course, public health and the community improvement. There's maybe a slight edge here when it comes to safety for students and for the driver.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. Purcell?
I'm just going to ask Dominic a question. Dominic, so if we go to the 6 to 8%, change in our bus contract, the town council has to approve that? I mean, does this whole thing that we're talking have to go to them before they can apply for the grant too?
I guess my sense would be the town council would have to probably approve some type of bid waiver to accommodate a 10-year contract. Or some agreement to have an extension. I don't know specifically if they would agree, or they would have to agree to the increase, but they set our budget. Or there's a combination between the mayor and town council. So, there is a funding concern.
All right, so
my question did I answer that? I don't know.
is, no matter what we say tonight, they still have to do some sort of, approval before we can even push this forward, that's all.
Yeah.
So it is for clarity's sake, Dominic and Dr. Menzo, would we be taking this to the town council next to talk through those steps, or would we ask Durham to apply, are we taking consensus essentially?
To be honest, I would have to consult with the town because I think that it's only fair. I think we would be, it would be very difficult for us not to do that. I think that would be the case. I have to say, do have some concerns about this. So I do have to say that. I do understand the value of the environment. I'd like to ask both presenters, how are these buses working in your children's school districts? Maggie, I can't hear you.
I think you're muted.
I don't know. This is Walter. Am I coming through okay?
Yep, you're coming through okay.
Okay, and Mr. Menzo, I think that the question was how would they work in our particular district? Is that
yeah, how are your
we actually do not have electric vehicles in my district. It's something that we have a committee on. I'm here for D303 I live I'm in Chicagoland. I'm in one of the Chicago suburbs. Operationally, there's no difference. Now, my district is in-source. It's not outsourced. It's a little bit different environment. It would take, and you'd have to, of course, vote on it if it has any sort of tax impact. But I don't know if Maggie looks like she may have cut out. I'm not sure if she's seen it different. She is involved with her board as well, and they are pursuing a green initiative with their fleet. So maybe she's got some technicolor to provide the team.
Still can't hear her.
Can't hear you.
Oh, she just sent me. I think she's having connection difficulties.
I guess the other thing I just want to mention to the board is that we, again, as was mentioned by Dominic, I don't believe we have the ability to have a 10-year contract with the bus company based of number one on town charter. And I don't know if there are other elements, but I don't believe so. Is that correct, Mr. Barone?
Correct.
So that's why we would definitely, this really does require the town charter, the town council to have a say in this, because we would be asking them to award a 10-year contract. Does the state have any guidance on 10-year contracts also, Mr. Barone?
I believe that, I don't believe you can have a 10-year contract, so we would have to look at some type of extension to the existing one. Although I believe Durham is working with the state on removing what they're talking about are barriers to bring in the electric buses, because they need a longer term contract. I don't believe that would be resolved before, so we would have to. We would have to work through that too.
Again, I'm not trying to be against the environment. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to make sure, because I know we get questions, and not everybody on this call get these questions because you don't have the roles we do. So sometimes it's a little bit easier for people who have a great enthusiasm about an initiative to go forward with something. But when we have to take the questions from the public and we have to have the answers, that 10-year contract is a huge question. And I just don't want to, it kind of got glossed over, not intentionally, but it was not, I don't think the board understood that clearly. So that's why I just wanted to bring that out, that those are two big pieces, that it's not just the town council that has to approve a 10-year contract, but also the state of Connecticut doesn't allow for 10-year contracts. So, I know there are other districts that want to pursue this in the state, but the state has not taken action on this yet. I'm not sure when it will. So I think I personally would need a little bit more information as to when that's going to occur, because I'm all for being a trailblazer, but I also want to make sure that, sometimes when you're first in line, you're the first person to go down to, and we're already dealing with a lot. Sometimes it's better to be, leading from behind, and we're already dealing a lot. We also, I have to remind the board, we do have a facility study that we put together. So we have a lot of energy efficiencies that we have to bring to the board next month, that you're going to be most likely looking to add additional money towards that project, as well as an energy efficiency, but then our facility study regarding the high schools and the middle schools. So there's a lot on our plate, and I just, again, I know I'm sounding like the wet blanket here, but I also need to be the real, to bring some realism into the conversation, because the perception of the town might not be as positive by us identifying all these different projects. And I just want to be honest and transparent with that comment. It's not a sign of lack of support on my part as superintendent. It's not my sign of support. It's just asking the difficult questions and bringing up the difficult points that have yet to be brought up in this conversation tonight. So I'm the elephant in the room. I guess I'll just bring those up to the group. And again, I don't mean to say that I don't support it. It's just that I think we have to make sure that all of these questions that I'm sure other people who are going to watch this either with us tonight or tomorrow are going to say, this is another idea that the Board of Ed has, where are they going to get the money? So I just want to put that out there, because again, as the leader of the district, my name will be the headline, and that's fine. That's why I do what I do. But I just want to make sure everybody recognizes that as we move forward. And I liked, actually, and I wish there was more data on this, Mrs. Corso at the beginning of this conversation mentioned smaller vehicles. And I kind of wish we could get a little bit more information about, could we look at the grant doing smaller vehicles, because obviously the percentage increase wouldn't be as great. The potential for a 10-year contract might not be necessary, because return on investment could be shorter. So you could maybe get your foot into the arena of electric vehicles in Connecticut, where you have not yet been able to do, in a way that's more acceptable to a community and maybe more acceptable financially. I don't know. I just thought that was a really good idea, but it might not be practical, because Walter, I know less about electric buses than you proclaim to know. And
Don't
you
be
know,
so sure. Don't be so sure.
so I'll stop there because I said enough, and I didn't mean to be the wet blanket, but I just wanted to bring those points out to everyone.
You're muted.
Everybody else did it. I might as well too, right? Mrs. Castelli has a question.
Yeah, do we know if the governor, since he has this initiative to reduce by 30% in 2030, is the state offering any grants that could be compounded with the VW grant?
There's nothing that we've been made aware of. I don't know, Mr. Barone, in your group, CASBO, have you been made aware of any grants?
No, my understanding is too, is they don't want you to double dip between the two grants or the different grants. Like there's the, I want to say it's a CT DARA or I get these grants mixed up. There is another grant, but the reason I believe Durham's not looking at that grant is because the VW grant is a significantly bigger grant and you can't have both. And if I'm incorrect, please tell me.
You were correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we have. So the state has a diesel emissions reduction grant. The total pool of money is about $500,000, anywhere from in a given year $500,000 to $700,000, which seems like a lot if it's just for you, but it turns out that more than us want support on these, and it's I think up to 25% of the vehicle cost. But there's definitely no double dipping. We know that.
I just want to find out if we want to move the presentation to Mrs. Kopfer's piece of it. Okay. Mrs. Kopfer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just 2 points to what Dr. Menza just said. Number one, smaller vehicles usually are not diesel. I think Maggie mentioned that. And so, as far as I know, they would not qualify for the VW grant or the DARA grant. And maybe Mrs. Ellenson can confirm that. I mean, I, as an EV owner, or my family, usually the smaller cars, the personal electric vehicles, pay for themselves within whatever number of years anyway. So you wouldn't even. I would love if Durham could pursue that, but it's probably a different story from the entire diesel bus issue. And number two, I am cautiously optimistic because, as Maggie said, these are rather conservative predictions. So if we do well with the grant application, we might get a higher percentage than the 40% that were on the slide. And I do hope that Durham, in their own interest, will really try and get those prices down even more, and that we might have a smaller percentage that we need to ask the town to agree to. The other point I would like to mention, well, basically, why is this important for Wallingford? It might not be it wasn't in my perception before I got involved in this. So the I-91 corridor is actually on different maps one of the worst air quality in the US, not only in Connecticut, but in the US. There's a grading from the American Association for Asthma, or don't pin me down on the name. I could look it up, or Mr. Barone maybe can show. I sent him 2 links. New Haven ranks number 8 and Hartford ranks number 9 in the United States on the prevalence, like the occurrence of asthma. So it's, we don't see it. We don't live next to a smoking company that blows out the visible smoke, but it's there. It's right next, and we're sitting between Route 15 and Route 91, Interstate 91. So our air is not the best. That's one thing, the health aspect really for our students. And obviously I started selfish with thinking about my own kids, but it's actually the entire community. It's not just the students, it's the drivers, it's the teachers, it's the entire community where those buses run through every day twice. Or multiple, 6 times, I should probably say. And the other thing, speaking of the community, maybe we can have the students speak for themselves, if that's visible at all. Thank you.
I agree. We do have a presentation from students that it was created by students, and then I also have a letter to read as well.
Did we want that? Did they want to speak first, and then I'll run the video?
Sure. I believe this is Ryan.
We have Ryan and Maddie are both on, I believe.
Hi, I'm Ryan Wojcicki. I'm a junior at Sheehan, and I'm the president of the Environmental Action Club. And we decided to make a petition to send around the town and like the community to see who would be in favor of getting the electric buses. And we received a little over 200. I think the exact number is like 204 signatures. And I have a list, but I'm not getting it until Friday the 13th, so I'll be able to send that out to you guys of like all those signers. But I wanted to do that so that we can really see who wanted to help not only the health of our community, but our environment in Wallingford.
Awesome. And did Maddie want to say anything?
Hi, I'm Madeline Bowen. I'm a senior at Sheehan. I've been working on this initiative with Ms. Kofer since last winter. And I really just wanted to point out, like from a student's perspective, how this impacts us and really our community overall. I think electric school buses are a great choice, both for our environment and our health. Kind of as previously talked about, how it can cut down our greenhouse gas emissions, and how it would provide a smoother transition to more renewable energy sources in the future. And I know someone else had touched on it earlier, but also in the age of COVID-19, where respiratory issues are of major concern, this is really an important issue that we should be focusing on. And I know the community and a lot of students, both through the petitions that have been signed and the video that you're going to view, agree with both me and Ryan.
Awesome. Dominic, can I read the letter that I got and then we'll go into the presentation?
Sure, and hopefully by then my dog will be done barking, but.
Dear Mrs. Allenson, my name is Sanjana Gade, and I am a member of the Martesian High School Environmental Club. As environmental club members, we are tasked with promoting solutions to the urgent and present climate changes that our district faces. The issue that we would like to address is the lack of attention toward clean energy solutions, such as implementing electric buses for the Wallingford community. We support the introduction of electric buses for use in the Wallingford School District to promote clean energy and divest from fossil fuel-based transportation. Some benefits of electric buses include the following. Electric buses provide quieter rides. Electric buses reduce the risk of respiratory problems among all students, especially for students with asthma issues, by eliminating carbon emissions. Electric buses minimize greenhouse gas emissions. Given a few examples of these benefits, we believe that electric buses are worth the investment for the town of Wallingford. As you are chair of operations for the Board of Ed, we need your support and leadership to further our request to increase the environmental awareness of our town. As other school districts and states have already made the more ecologically friendly transition, students of Wallingford hope to follow the more sustainable path for our future as well. Thank you for your consideration and anticipated assistance. Sincerely, Sanjana Gade.
We set for the video?
We are set for the video.
I'm gonna try to figure out how to do this again. Present now and then pick the screen, I think.
Yep. Present now and pick the screen it's on. I can see your screen coming and we do not have sound though. I can see it, but there's no sound.
Yes. I'm sorry, can you folks hear that or no? Is there any sound?
There's no sound.
There's no sound? Um,
We just heard a little bit at the end, so
how about now?
no.
No.
Right before you stopped it, I heard something. Do you want to share it with me and I could try it?
How do I share? Can I just forward you an email?
Sure.
It's the link with that next to the 8 students video message. It says the link to the right of that.
Hi, I'm Devin.
Well, we can hear it.
Okay. Give me a sec. Just one more second, sorry.
Hi, I'm Devin, and I'm
Can you see it?
Coming up now.
fifth grade. I asked Board of Ed to bring electric school buses into our district to improve the air quality for students who play outdoor sports in town.
Hi, Board of Ed. My name is Sanjana Gade, and I'm a sophomore at Sheen High School. I think that electric buses are worth the investment because there are minimal repairs in comparison to the maintenance and fuel we have to pay for using the buses we have now. And I think that's especially true given that electric buses have fewer parts. Also, I think that our district needs to preserve our atmosphere because diesel emissions are making it difficult for some students with respiratory issues to breathe. And I think we need to change not only for our students, but also our climate. And I think that 100% starts at a local level above all else. And we should take the opportunity to change if we have the chance. If Wallingford implements electric buses, at least we know that we're actively trying to reduce our carbon footprint and also encouraging neighboring towns to do so as well. And I think this choice ultimately takes political municipal courage. And I hope that we can have a lasting impact on the way we redefine our priorities. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Clarissa Minwang, and I'm going to be a senior at Sheehan High School. I believe that Wallingford Public Schools should transition to electric school buses because they are healthy for our environment. According to environmentamerica.org, electric school buses produce significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions than diesel. Replacing all the country's diesel-powered school buses and transitioning to electric school buses would eliminate about 2 million tons of greenhouse emissions each year.
Hi, I'm Ava. I'm a sixth grader at Moran in Wallingford. I asked the Board Ed to bring electric school buses into our district to improve academic performance.
Hi, I'm Logan, and I'm from fourth grade at Fritz in Wallingford. I asked for the Board of Ed to bring electric school buses into our district for better air quality and better learning environment.
Hi, my name is Betsy and this is Katie, and we are both Wallingford residents that have grown up in the Wallingford public school system. And we would like to ask the Wallingford Board of Education to bring electric school buses to our town. So we'd like to see electric school buses because we value clean air and freedom from the fossil fuel industry. And we think in addition that it would be a great example to set for school children and children growing up in Wallingford today.
Hi, Board Ed. My name is Madeline Bowen. I'm a senior at Montessori High School. I think it's about time we start talking about electric school buses. Electric school buses are not only a more cost-efficient option than our current school buses, but they also are a healthier alternative altogether. They're both great for our environment and the health of our students. As we talk about our environment, we look at the fact that electric school buses can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 90%. And they also have better potential for using renewable energy sources in the future. Further, as we talk about the health of our students, especially in the context of COVID-19, we should be looking at the students who are compromised or who have respiratory issues that put them at a higher risk of contracting COVID. As we look at these, they're caused by a number of issues, including our buses, which contribute to the pollution and the poor air quality in Wallingford. As we don't know when an efficient vaccine will be available for distribution, it's important that we take these students into account and make the proper decisions for our future. Let's take our students into account and go electric.
Hello, my name is Alexis Eaton, and I graduated from Lyman Hall High School this past July. Even though I'm technically no longer a part of the Wallingford public school system, I still have concerns and want what is best for our district. Electric school buses would be a great investment because they are cost effective, they would improve Wallingford's air quality, and they would not need as much maintenance. While I was at Lyman Hall, I was president of the school's environmental club. Over the past 2 years, we created a marker recycling program and built a recycling center within the library. The marker recycling program within the first year alone allowed us to send 18 pounds of markers back to the Crayola factory to be turned into new markers. Our efforts paid off and we had enormous success. Getting electric buses for the district would be no different. Despite the initial drawbacks, which in the case of the buses would be the cost, eventually we would see a return on our investment. Let's work toward a cleaner future for Wallingford and our children by investing in electric school buses. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Olivia Sutton. I'm going into second grade. I go to E.T. Stevens. I enjoy playing with my American Girl doll, baking cakes, and swimming. Something that I also enjoy is recycling. I do my part to help our Earth, so now it is time for Wallingford Public Schools to do their part by electric school buses. My friend's mom has a Tesla which is electric, and I think it's really cool. Electric buses work like Tesla, so I think they'd be really cool too. Electric buses are really good for our planet, so we should get them. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Autumn, you're muted.
Well, all right. So I wanted to say that was a fantastic presentation by our students, and I wanted to thank them for putting that together. Definitely huge. It's huge to hear from the community. So we do not have anything else on our agenda regarding this. Again, next steps would be us talking to the town council to move forward with any kind of grant, saying to apply for any grants or, whatever we're going to do next. So I think that's where we are with that. So there's no consensus to take. Do I have any other comments before we move on? Okay. So seeing no further comments, I wanted to thank Maggie and Walter. Oh, sorry, Kathy, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
So I'm just going to say that I think there's a lot of information tonight, and I think we all, at least I know, I need time to digest some of it, formulate some new questions, take into account everything that was said. And so I think as a board, we need further conversation before I think we send anybody off trying to pursue a grant and spending a lot of time. Grant writing is not easy. I know, I don't know that personally, but I've, certainly heard about it. And I don't think we should have anybody spending a lot of dedicated time if our ultimate goal or our ultimate decision is not to pursue this. But I think I personally am certainly not ready, even though it's not on the agenda, to take any kind of consensus. I'm not ready to really come to my decision yet without some more conversations. So just wanted to put that out there.
Agreed. Okay. So thank you again, Maggie and Walter and Ryan and Maddie and Sanjana and all of our presenters today, and Mrs. Kupfer, of course.
Thank you.
If you guys want to drop, you can. You certainly don't have to stay.
Oh no! Thank you guys so much. Thanks for putting up with me and Maggie, of course. Anything, we're here for you. This is whatever direction you want to go. We'll respect it. We'll support it. But shout out to Ryan and Maddie. I'm remembering what I was like as a junior, and I'm just a little bit dismayed at myself after listening to them. So great job, guys. We'll drop off. I'll drop off. Thanks a lot. Appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to Area B, cafeteria reports. Mr. Bondi.
I'm sorry, Autumn, were you ready for me? I can't, you were breaking up.
I'm ready for you.
Okay. All right. So our first document is the food services year-to-date comparison. For October, income was $114,821, and expenses were $162,345 for a loss for the month of $47,524. And our reimbursement detail, federal lunch reimbursement was $105,907, and state match reimbursement was $1,272 for a total of $107,179. We had 21 serving days. Revenue per day was $5,468. Expenses per day were $7,731. We served 29,583 meals, and our meals per day averaged 1,409. For our year to date, our total revenue is $213,872. Our total expenses are $419,476. and we have a loss of $205,603. Our lunch reimbursement is $188,554. We have breakfast reimbursement of $15,404 and state lunch match reimbursement of $2,264 for a total of $206,222. We've had 63 serving days so far, which includes July and August. Our revenue per day was $3,395. Expenses are $6,658 per day. We served 52,669 meals, which totals an average of 836 meals per day. Item B2 is just basically a backup to our year-to-date expenses. Item B3 is our cash flow analysis. Again, this is I'm sorry?
Sorry, 1 second. It looks like I have a question or comment from
Sure.
Dr. Menso and
Yep.
Mrs. Renchio.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I might be, I don't want to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make it very clear that on the B2 report, that our enrollment is not only 4,116 students. Those are students in attendance. Those are our students that are in attendance. Our total enrollment is actually 5,407 students. So I don't want anyone to see this and think our enrollment dropped 1,532 kids. That's because those are voluntary distance learning students. So they're home. There's still lunches that could be captured, but our total enrollment is not down that much. So I don't want anybody to think that we now have 1,500 less students than we projected last year, because I don't want anybody to think that there's phantom enrollment. We have real enrollment, and those are our numbers. So just to clarify.
Thank you.
Mrs. Recchio?
So document B3.
1 sec, Mr. Bundy.
And I
I'm
just
sorry,
want to,
Autumn, I can't really hear you.
You're
I
fading
think
in and out.
one other clarification on B1. Mr. Bondi, you mentioned that the days served were 63 and that included July and August.
Correct.
So that, if I totally understand that, I just want to make sure that people know, if we're looking at the average meals per day of 836, that's really low because we're averaging in 2 summer months that it was really pickup service. So just to reflect on what our October number is of 1,400 meals per day, that's more, in my opinion, reflective of where we are right now. And now
Correct.
that we're doing lunches, we're bundling the meals, so student walks out with a lunch and a breakfast, that should even go higher next month.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. So getting back to B3, document B3. Again, this is a work in progress. This is our cash flow analysis. July through October is our actual to date, and anything from November through June is estimated. And again, these estimations as we go forward will change based on past history. We've only got, unfortunately, we only have 2 months. Really, we can't really count July and August for data. And I'm hoping that we can even raise our meal counts further. Although in November and December, I'm not so sure, but we will certainly try. So as of October, we have our profit and loss is 100, our cash flow analysis, profit and loss is negative $140,617. And if you look at the income, we need to keep in mind that usually our income is received 2 months later than the month that we have earned it. The state is usually 2 months behind in paying reimbursements. So we are looking at right now a total for the year, total loss of $272,615. And again, that's going to change as we go forward. It's going to go hopefully down. It may or may not go up also. I think that's all I can say about this at this point. Are there any questions? Okay.
Mr. Votto?
What was that last number you gave, Jim?
$272,615 is the projected loss for the year as of now.
Thank you.
Okay, document B4 is our participation report, and I am so happy to report that this is much better than we were in September. So right now we are running between 50 and 60%, 61%, almost 62% in all the elementary schools. The middle schools combined are at 38.9%, and the high schools are lagging behind at 27.2%. And again, this isn't really a great reflection on our participation rates because at any given time there are students in quarantine, especially at the high schools. They're both closed right now. So these numbers, they're not really reflective of our real participation rate if everybody was in school. We are doing very well at the elementary schools, although again, there are some classes out here and there. So once these come back, you'll see these rates hopefully rise. Any questions on participation? Okay.
Mr. Votto?
Real quick, the participation rate, the middle school and high school, that's still the grab and go, correct?
Correct,
And
yes.
You haven't seen an increase in that too much, or?
Not at this point because, like I said, both high schools are closed. We have seen a slight increase in our remote service because the high schools are closed. We're getting probably 6 to 8 more meals each day, and I do get a lot of phone calls from parents, questioning where to pick up meals and everything. So hopefully that keeps rising.
Okay, thanks.
And the last document, item B5 is the improvement opportunity log. That has not changed since September. There have been no complaints in October, which is very good. And the last item is the balance sheet for October. Questions?
All right. I don't see any hands, so we will take consensus to approve the reports in section B. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Okay, so we have accepted the cafeteria reports. Moving on to Mr. Deptilla and the project summary for construction. Thank you, Mr. Bondi.
Okay, Autumn, I couldn't hear you, but I think you called my name. So we have a few changes that we made to the summary construction sheet. First one is the design for the Space Center at the lower level of Fritz. We have a final design. We've reviewed it with the fire marshal. He basically already approved it, but I did the paperwork and now he has it. He'll send that to the building department pending his approval. Everything should go through on that. It's a pretty exciting project. We've got some good ideas and can't wait to get started on it. We did receive the level 1 audit from Fuss and O'Neill energy audit, and I'm reviewing that currently. There's a lot of information in it. There are some things that we will not be able to implement due to COVID. The two things, energy conservation and the precautions that we have taken for COVID are at two opposite ends of the spectrum. So there will be some things that cannot be implemented at this time, but those recommendations will be implemented at a later date. Many people have seen the new oil tank at Sheehan that's installed and operational. We still have to, we're going to install a fence around it, but that worked out quite good. The labor on that was primarily Board of Ed in-house labor. To date, we've probably saved somewhere in the range of $60,000 to $70,000 of town funds, based on two of my mechanics working on that job and one of our vendors pouring the pad. So that was a substantial savings to the town there by pulling that in-house. The aquatic timing and scoring board for the Sheehan pool has been installed and that's complete. When you look at the UST removal, we removed one tank at Fritz and that's complete. Those completed items will be on the completed sheet next month. And then the one other item, the boom mower, which we're going to be getting, we're issuing a PO. That doesn't sound real significant, but that's how we maintain property lines and fence lines. And we've been without anything like that for probably 10 years, and it shows because what happens is invasive plants start creeping onto our properties. And so without it, it's really hard to maintain that. Even with conventional mowing, you get some creep on all areas. So that's a significant item for us. But that's about it. Any questions?
None that I can see. Can you
All
hear
right.
me now?
Thank you. Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right, so let me pull up my agenda. All right, so no consensus on that item. So if there are no other comments, I will call for an adjournment. I don't see anything, so it is 8:48 and we are adjourned.